In my latest video, I talked about these PlayStation games that are going to other platforms. We mentioned about 4 of them: MLB The Show, Lego Horizon Adventures. We talked about Death Stranding. It is a PlayStation published game, even though Kojima basically is the mind behind it, and his own studio and a different publisher also has been working with him to get the game on PC and Xbox. However, it is a PlayStation game. Sure, you can call it whatever you want, but Arrowhead is not a PlayStation first party studio, but they still made the PlayStation game Helldivers 2. So keep all of this in mind. And I think we can also take a very close look at what might be going on in the industry. To that video, the gaslighting begins. There's some PlayStation fans who I think critical thought is probably the farthest thing away from, basically associating these folk with at the end of the day. In fact, one of them said, keep in mind that this guy likes playing Gotham Knights. I wouldn't take any opinions from somebody who plays Gotham Knights. So I blocked them because that's an idiotic statement. You don't want to be honest. And so there's no need for us to basically entertain what it is that you're saying on this channel, because I've never heard something so childish in my life, and I teach children in school setting. Now, another person made another comment and said, Xbox games feel the need to go to PlayStation because Xbox as a console is basically dead. This is absolutely a lie, because if that console was dead, why would PlayStation bother to go to Pearl Abyss and ask them to block games from going there? You see, PlayStation continues to make these kinds of comments look very, very silly. At the end of the day, does it make sense? If the Xbox console was dead, why would they go to Shift Up to have them block a game that they had introduced to the world as Project Eve, putting the PlayStation and the Xbox logo there, and then have them block it from going to Xbox? What are they planning to achieve with that? Apparently, even though Xbox may not have sold as much, it seems like Xbox is a threat. The other question I want to ask is, if this is the case, why have Square Enix go into cahoots with them for about 4-ish games in the Final Fantasy franchise? And I say ish because it's Final Fantasy 7 broken into 3 and then Final Fantasy 16. Could it be that, they're threatened by this ecosystem? Because Final Fantasy 16 is on PC. That game could have launched on PC day one, and we know we can associate the PC platform as PlayStation's biggest threat. They bow down to PC. In fact, Xbox has also basically brought them down to their knees, and they're bowing before that. And the final thing to this particular comment that Xbox as a console is basically dead is interesting, because they go ahead and say, look at the sales. So PlayStation is the only way to reach console consumers. You would have to step over 150 million Nintendo Switch, consoles to get to that conclusion. It's insane though, but you would have to actually do it. And that plastic element itself and the glass shards that would come out of, pretty much each particular Switch that you step on to get to that conclusion could mortally wound you. That's what we call mental gymnastics in, the lightest sense. So I got to be very, careful when I take some of this stuff. Xbox lost the console war and has become a publisher. PlayStation is also a publisher. They're selling consoles, but here we have all their games. PlayStation, right here. Steam considers them a third-party developer. They put them and lump them up in the same place as Capcom and everybody else. You see what's going on? It appears that a trend Xbox kicked off has been making them money, and PlayStation would like to get in on that. Even PlayStation's own third-party partners that have been in cahoots to grow their platform are also breaking, they're breaking code and jumping to this trend. And they said this, as a publisher, I guess they're doing okay. PlayStation is also that third-party publisher that you're saying. And the guy sliding that, and all of the miscategorizations to me are quite amazing, because like I said, there's a lot of mental gymnastics that goes into this particular paradigm. You would have to literally, convince yourself one way or the other that what you're saying is actually true, when in reality, it's actually probably the biggest lie that you could actually sit in. Shared belief is very, very powerful and very strong. And so instead of actually wasting time on these silly comments, in many cases, like this one's a really silly comment, not as silly as the other one that got me to actually laugh and, block that user and his fellow commenter who said that there's a lot of information in that video. Let's continue with the list, because the list itself, shows exactly what's going on. MLB The Show is on the, is on the Xbox platform and also on Game Pass. Remember when that actually first came about, right? They said MLB wanted it to be. Sony had no input in the decision, which I think is kind of the weirdest thing, that Sony, this Sony that told Disney, go pound sand if we don't get what we want with Spider-Man in the Avengers series, is the Sony that allowed for MLB to bend their hands. Sony, who basically sold the Death Stranding IP to Kojima and said, yeah, if you want to publish it on Xbox, you got to put it under your name. And Predator Hunting Grounds is also their developers who bought the publishing rights for Predator Hunting Grounds. These were PlayStation published, sponsored developed games. In fact, Death Stranding is made on the Decima engine, which is the engine that Guerrilla Studios used for Horizon and, Horizon Zero Dawn and Horizon Forbidden West. Then you have the Lego Adventures game, which is Lego wanted it. That's the excuse that these PlayStation fanboys are bringing when their games are going to other platforms, other consoles. And I never even really added, Marathon, because Marathon is a Bungie game. And apparently, guess what the excuse is? Bungie wanted it. Bungie is an independent studio. That's what they keep saying, right? But they've gutted Bungie. Bungie doesn't even look like itself. And the question is, why allow Bungie dictate the terms? You gave these guys, $3 billion. You paid $3 billion for them. And here they are dictating the terms. To me, it seems like this PlayStation, thing is showing how weak of, a so-called console leader they are. Because when Xbox bought Bethesda, they didn't let Bethesda, dictate any terms. They bought Bethesda and they were like, know your place. This is how it's going to be, right? Think about it. They said, we're going to get those games on Game Pass. We call the shots. Don't be silly in this regard. So at the end of the day, what I think is going on is there are some of our PlayStation fellow brethren who have not necessarily dialed into the changes in the market. At some point, you're going to have to actually go back and say to yourself, with the advancement of PC hardware right now, it looks really, really attractive for people to pretty much look at their consoles and say, these are dying breeds of hardware. I know it may be hard to swallow. It's not, it's not an easy reality to swallow, but it's been a dying breed since 2016. I just got to tell you, if we're still sitting here 8 years later trying to still point this reality to you, then, you're basically the last one to pretty much hop aboard what reality is. I mean, if you kind of think about right now, I told you, AMD is the boss at self-cannibalization. They don't even let a few months pass before they go ahead and cannibalize their own product. I want to sit down and do a little video on this, and it's going to be very interesting with their newest offering, the Ryzen 7 9800X3D. And this is pretty much after they pretty much sold out the Ryzen 7 7800X3D. They're bringing another CPU that is better than that CPU and putting it they're going to put it at the price point close to it, where they've now cannibalized themselves, where you can buy whichever one you want based on your dollars. But it's also interesting to see the prices driving each other down. Not only that, they stealth launched another one called the 7600X3D. So AMD is basically beating on its own self with competition and every other AMD device. So your consoles, being AMD devices, have pretty much been set at a market point where they have CPUs and GPUs that will beat them and outperform them at similar price points. It's insane. If anyone is not looking at this reality, I almost feel like, okay, maybe you don't know, or maybe you've chosen that this is the path that you want to go, where you're going to ignore the reality that's actually, in front of you with everything that's going on. And so at the end of the day, this Xbox trend of going multi-platform has been the single most beneficial thing for them that I think of, because they may not have sold 60 million or 65 million consoles, but they do have a pipeline of selling games. I mean, if their Starfield game could do well, even with all of the criticisms and all of the negativity in the media, you got to say, man, that I think was actually quite interesting, because it really did show the strength of the PC community and the strength of the PC game, market at the moment that it is, because that market has always been something that's been very significant in the whole conversation in terms of gaming platforms, being number 2 across the board with all of the above. But anyways, these are my thoughts. Thanks so much for watching the video. Those of you that are here for objective, analyses, I really appreciate you. I think what happens is, you find out what the reality is, and a lot of the shared beliefs that you see from among a lot of the console fans, don't necessarily apply anymore. And I think it could be a little jarring, but many are going to change their minds. It's okay. It takes a while, but I'm not here to convince anybody actually, so I won't even waste my time with that. Thanks again, folks. Peace out.